Good morning. My name is David Chu, and I am the City Attorney of San Francisco. Today, we are here to announce a significant settlement our San Francisco City Attorney's Office has secured following our trial victory against Walgreens, where a federal court found that the pharmacy chain substantially contributed to the opioid epidemic and created a public nuisance in San Francisco. First, I'd like everyone to understand how we got here. In the 1970s, certain pharmaceutical companies created powerful prescription opioids and manufactured a crisis of undiagnosed pain. Extremely dangerous and addictive opioids were marketed to patients as safe. We now know that was a blatant lie. Prescription drugs normally reserved for end-of-life care were given to people with headaches and back pain. This resulted in millions of Americans, an entire generation, becoming dependent on opioids. Every aspect of the opioid supply chain, from manufacturers to distributors to retailers, played a part in creating and exacerbating this crisis. 5 years ago, San Francisco brought a groundbreaking bellwether lawsuit against every part of the supply chain, including distributors and dispensers like Walgreens, who pushed these drugs out to patients without regard for their obligation under the Federal Controlled Substances Act to flag suspicious orders. They were more concerned with profit than following their legal obligations. They did not give their pharmacists time to conduct due diligence, pressuring their pharmacists to fill. Quoting Judge Breyer's decision, Walgreens San Francisco pharmacies received over 1,200,000 red flag opioid prescriptions, yet they performed due diligence for less than 5% of these prescriptions before dispensing them. This opioid epidemic, as we all know, has impacted every corner of our country, from urban areas like ours to rural towns in middle America. And there has been a direct correlation between the prescription opioids these companies pushed years ago and the addiction crisis on our streets today. Again, quoting Judge Breyer, there was persuasive evidence showing how abuse of prescription opioids often leads to the use of illicit opioids, including heroin and fentanyl. As addiction becomes more severe, opioid users tend to seek out stronger, cheaper, and more potent opioids. The cycle of addiction is foreseeable. And from the trial, it was noted that the addictions of a shocking 70 to 80% of heroin users today started with prescription opioids. For so many of us, it has been frustrating to witness the tragedies on our streets every day. It's easy to blame those we see right in front of us who are struggling. But we must remember that some of the most profitable companies in the world engineered this public health crisis. Now, before discussing the settlement itself, let me say this. There is no amount of money that will bring back the lives that we have lost due to this epidemic. We mourn our brothers and sisters, our mothers and fathers. But the one thing that we can do as lawyers is to fight for justice, to ensure that those who cause harm are held accountable. With this case, we took on opioid manufacturers, distributors, and pharmacies. One by one, we secured settlements against various defendants. And until today, our lawsuit had already brought in $130 million to the city. The last remaining defendant by the end of the trial was Walgreens. And again, from the court opinion, I quote, Walgreens gave short shrift to its regulatory obligations for 15 years. Its pharmacies failed to perform due diligence on hundreds of thousands of red flag prescriptions, many of which written by suspicious prescribers that Walgreens' own pharmacists warned their company about. The evidence presented at trial made it clear that Walgreens, the dominant retail pharmacy chain in San Francisco, which had a history of failing to comply with federal regulations, filled a significant volume of illegitimate opioid prescriptions. In doing so, Walgreens contributed directly to opioid diversion and made the opioid epidemic in San Francisco worse than it otherwise would have been. Today, I'm proud to announce that we have secured a $230 million settlement with Walgreens coming out of this lawsuit, which is the largest award to a local jurisdiction against an opioid defendant in the country. We will receive $57 million by next June of 2024, and then receive the vast majority of the settlement over the next 8 years, over $175 million by 2030. As points of comparison, if we had not brought this lawsuit, we would only be receiving our allocated share of national litigation, which would have been about $15 million. This settlement is over 15 times what we would have otherwise received. Our settlement is more than twice the value of the $83 million settlement received by the entire state of West Virginia, a state ravaged by opioids. Today's settlement brings the total value of all settlements due to this lawsuit to over $350 million, which is the largest amount in the history of our office. This is money our city will have over the next 15 years to alleviate the crisis, to get people the help they need, and to address the tragic suffering. Now, in this trial, we have sought to lift up the voices in our city with witnesses from city departments toiling on the front lines of the crisis. The judge relied on their stories and his findings. We are deeply grateful to our city partners for their incredible work. And I want to specifically thank the Department of Public Health, led by Dr. Grant Colfax, to our public library, thank you, Librarian Michael Lambert, to our fire department, I want to thank Chief Nicholson, to our Department of Public Works, thank you to Director Carla Short, to our Recreation and Parks Department, to our Medical Examiner Office, to our San Francisco Police Department, our Sheriff's Office, and so many more. Let me conclude by thanking the legal warriors who fought on the front lines of the fight for justice. I am so proud to head up the best municipal law office in the country. We would not have achieved this nationally significant verdict. At this moment, the first and only bench trial in the country to rule against the opioid industry and the first bench trial to find Walgreens liable without the brilliant legal minds in our office. On our opioids team, we have Yvonne Mede, Sarah Eisenberg, Jamie Hewling-DeLay, John George, Michaela O'Rourke, Sarah Gutierrez, Julie Van Nostern, Owen Clements, and others. I want to also acknowledge my predecessor, Dennis Herrera, and his Chief Deputy Attorney, Ron Flynn. We also would not have been able to successfully litigate this case against some of the most profitable companies in the world without our great outside counsel. They include Leif Cabraser, Hyman, and Bernstein, Robbins, Geller, Rudman, and Dowd, Simmons, Hanley, Conroy, Levin, Papantoya, Rafferty, Whites, Luxembourg, Andrus Anderson. And I want to take a moment and welcome our former city attorney, Luis Rennie, and the Rennie Public Law Group. On behalf of our city and all the people who will be benefited by the $350 million of settlements into the coming years, I want to thank each and every one of you who are here today, who share in the credit for today's announcement. And with that, we have 3 speakers today. It's my honor to bring up someone who has, for his entire life, but particularly in recent years, been grappling with crisis after crisis. He is the head of our Department of Public Health, and of course I'm referring to Dr. Grant Colfax. Dr. Colfax.
Well, thank you, City Attorney Chu, and I really want to thank you for giving the historical perspective on what pharmaceutical companies and distributors did to create this crisis. I trained during the period of time that you talked about, including at Zuckerberg San Francisco Hospital, and I witnessed firsthand the pharmaceutical and distributor abuse of patients, the most vulnerable populations, in fueling addiction, the consequences of which we are dealing with today. And I really want to thank you and your team for the leadership you showed in holding the distributors accountable, and also want to acknowledge and thank the DPH team of experts that testified, as well as, of course, our other city partners. Now, the Department of Public Health is committed to preventing drug overdose deaths through aggressive interventions. Our priority is to bring people with substance use disorders into care and to save lives. With the addition of these settlement dollars, the city will help many San Franciscans on their journey to wellness and recovery. The national fentanyl crisis has affected cities across the country, including San Francisco. Fentanyl, a synthetic opioid, is 50 times more potent than heroin and 100 times more potent than morphine. Our overdose prevention strategy includes urgently expanding distribution of naloxone, a medication that reverses opioid overdoses. In 2022, our department and our community partners distributed over 72,000 kits of naloxone to save lives. And in recent months, we have trained more than 3,300 people to recognize and respond to an overdose. The department has also made treatment for opioid disorder a key priority, including using evidence-based treatments, including buprenorphine and methadone, accessible to people so that they can deal with their addiction and begin the journey of treatment and recovery. Over the last few years, the department has increased its service hours at community clinics that offer buprenorphine and methadone so that every door is truly the right door for people to receive these life-saving medications. In addition, our behavioral health pharmacy makes regular deliveries, meeting people where they are at city-funded housing to provide them with the services they need, including a clinical psychiatric pharmacist and nursing teams who do outreach to start people on medications. Providing care for people who are experiencing homelessness and substance use disorders who are particularly vulnerable to overdose is a high priority for the department. 7 days a week, our street care teams are in neighborhoods with public drug use working to draw people into care. Through a consistent, caring presence, these teams build trust with individuals wary of healthcare settings due to the trauma of chronic homelessness or who are reluctant to stop using drugs. We are also implementing a major expansion of residential care and treatment beds for people with behavioral health needs, including substance use disorders. In recent years, we have opened more than 350 new residential care and treatment beds in addition to our existing 2,200 care beds in our system, so over 2,500 residential care beds. And I just want to take another moment to mention the fact there's been a lot of talk about treatment on demand. As we stand here today, there is no wait for people to access life-saving medications in our system. The time to access buprenorphine or methadone is less than 1 day, and we have substance use treatment beds available as we speak. So in closing, these funds from this settlement will be critical in helping us sustain and expand our programs to address this fentanyl pandemic, and most importantly, to save lives. So thank you very much, and thank you again, City Attorney, for your leadership.
Thank you, Dr. Colfax, and of course, I want to thank all of the men and women who work in your department and throughout city departments for your partnership in addressing this crisis and with this lawsuit. As I mentioned before, this success would not have been possible but for the partnership with so many amazing outside counsel who had expertise in what was going on in litigation around the country. Here to represent them is Elizabeth Cabraser from Leith Cabraser.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to stand here on behalf of the many outside lawyers and staff members who came together and answered the call of San Francisco to partner with, I think, the best city attorney's office in the country to bring the resources, the experts, the experience of national opioids litigation to the trial here in San Francisco. And I cannot mention all of these attorneys and professionals by name. I'll simply mention those who could not be here today: my partner Richard Hyman, Jane Conroy, Pete Mouget, and Ailish Beg. They were the four co-lead trial counsel. They were the above the waterline face of this case. But they were assisted by many, many lawyers and others from the city attorney's office and others. It took and takes an army to mount a case like this and to put on a trial like this. Not every city or county can do it. Not every city or county would do it. The cost, the risk, the challenges are tremendous. And so I'm so proud to say that together with the city's attorney's office, we won a trial victory, the first of its kind, in opioids litigation nationally. And because of that, we were able to negotiate a settlement that brings much needed money and resources to San Francisco on a schedule that is accelerated more quickly than the national settlements. But there's one thing that I think needs to be said. While we are celebrating locally, this trial and this settlement has a ripple effect. And the ripple effect is that because of the judgment rendered by the federal court, defendants came more quickly to the national negotiating table. And this outcome in San Francisco catalyzed a new set of national settlements with Teva and Allergan, with Walgreens, with Walmart, and with CVS that together, when they become effective, will generate an additional $18 billion nationwide to help us fight the opioids epidemic. And I just got called out for using the word celebrate. And I think that's fair. We're not celebrating anything today except an opportunity that because San Francisco stood up and fought, we now have the funding that is so needed to continue the fight against opioids. It is a fight for the lives of the people of the city and county of San Francisco, and it is a fight which will, of necessity, not a necessity of our making, continue for every day of the rest of our lives. Those of us standing here who are lawyers in the opioids litigation will be continuing this battle and this fight in every jurisdiction, in every court where we can, and we will not give up until we have done everything that we can do as lawyers to join in this fight. But this is a fight that takes city and county services, government services, private citizens, and I just want you to know today, if you don't know already, that the services provided by the dedicated people of the city and county of San Francisco are second to none in expertise, dedication, efficiency, and resolve that this crisis will not overcome us. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And again, thank you to all the legal warriors that stood firm as we fought for justice and for accountability and for the resources of our city to be able to address this crisis moving forward. Our final speaker today, let me say that during the trial, we spoke about the fact that every day at Zuckerberg SF General, 25% of the cases that come through, of the patients who come through, are coming to us because of the opioid crisis. And on the front line, we have today the Chief of Emergency Medicine from CZFG, Dr. Christopher Caldwell. Doctor.
Thank you and good morning. I appreciate everybody being here for this incredibly important announcement, and I also want to thank San Francisco City Attorney and everybody here for taking this important step and making this happen. My name is Chris Caldwell. I'm the Chief of Emergency Medicine at Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital and Trauma Center, and I testified in this federal opioid trial about the impact of the opioid epidemic and what we see, what my experience has been in the emergency department every day, and the overwhelming loss of life and long-term health impacts that the opioid epidemic has had. And as much as I recognize very personally that we have just faced a pandemic and many other healthcare crises and challenges, it would be hard for me to describe a greater challenge that we face and a greater crisis than the opioid epidemic. And so much of it ends up on our city hospital emergency department and like many across the state and across the country. And every day we will see 15, 20, 30 cases or more that range from acute overdoses and in some cases that result in loss of life to uncomfortable withdrawal that can be so miserable that it will drive further use if not treated, to the long-term impacts and long-term healthcare impacts that we see from opioid use disorder. And what can sometimes begin as a simple prescription at Walgreens that can sometimes snowball into full-blown opioid use disorder with lifetime impacts. This is such an incredibly important next step in reinvesting in our community, and will give us the opportunity to do exactly that and to focus resources on treatment and prevention of this devastating crisis. So thank you again to everybody here who made these efforts. This is an important step. Our work is not over. We've got a lot still to go, but this is really an important step in this process. Thank you.
So again, I want to thank everyone for coming out and every person who are standing on these steps for your role in moving this forward. I want to say to the press, a number of us will obviously be around if you want to ask any of us individual questions. I want to ask my communications team, thank Jen Cord and Alex Barrett-Shorter. Do you guys want a final picture of the group? Should we all stand in front of the podium, perhaps? So that's a wrap for today. But again, thank you so much for being here, and the fight continues. Thank you.